Welcome, Jay from RightSprite here. After the popular release of the Miyoo Mini, they are back now with the Miyoo Mini Plus, making it a great entry for an affordable dedicated emulation handheld device of 2023. With their sleek design, build quality and mass following behind this, which ultimately could make it one of the best to choose from for your portable gaming needs. If you didn't already get affected by a sheer lack of stock of the original with no support and no screen replacements. But here we are, let's first look into what you get altogether with your purchase. I have to say, I really do like this box design, kudos already. I have to first mention that this review would not have happened if it wasn't for the company of LITNXT or LITNXT, who was kind enough to get in touch with me and send me one to review for you guys, and a 10% off for the Miyoo Mini at the timing of this video is now available. They include a plethora of these handheld gaming devices that are worth it at least checking out, and this awesome One Player X. Now this would be great to get my hands on to review. Inside altogether you have the handheld of course, and then we have some screen protectors which I recommend putting on straight away, a USB-C cable for charging and data transferring, and a handy manual to give you a guide around its built-in OS. Now let's have a good look at this Miyoo Mini Plus. As you can see, they sent me the transparent purple color, which is an eye-popping purple. Really do like what they did here, which was my first impression. Straight away, the D-pad did feel a little bit stiff, but then I just needed to break it in a bit and then the D-pad was pretty fine. The D-pad and front-facing buttons are all rubber membrane, and the D-pad is pretty identical to the original Miyoo Mini, with a very short travel making it easy and comfortable to use. The 4 buttons do have a classic Game Boy colorization with a glossy finish, and they are just the right size for me personally. The Start, Select and Menu button have no rubber membrane and no glossy finish, just a plastic style with a very short travel. Again, some rubber texture ones like the original Game Boy would have been great. The volume on the left hand side, again, even have a shorter travel than the rest of the buttons on the handheld. Now onto the back buttons, they have changed up the game here by responding to customers' input of the original Miyoo Mini with a different setup. As you can see, the placement is more centralized with a raised R2 and L2 button that I do find a lot better. This makes the tip of your finger be able to trigger the R2 and L2 more comfortable, and the middle part of your finger to trigger the L1 and R1. The travel is very short, much like the volume buttons with no rubber memory, making it easier to trigger, which is what we all want for that less hand cramp. The overall build of this handheld has a very smooth plastic finish, giving it more of a premium style of build quality. Then at the base of this handheld you will find the audio jack on the left hand side, one micro SD slot, again with no cover, and with the same with the USB-C for charging. Now with that out of the way, let's move on to its specifications to see what we are working with, then delve into this emulation performance, its OS functionality with some comparison, with some hints and tips and some mentions of its downfalls. But first, a very quick shout out to the guys from Purchse, who has been great and sent me a bunch of their awesome goods. They are based in Taiwan and have been around for over 20 years. They strive on technology, development and innovation to produce quality products. Here is the Wingman Converter XB2, where I will be doing a full review and more of the goods in upcoming content, where I'll explain more in its details with compatibility, input registration with recommended setups. So far this is just what I needed for a dedicated wireless controller for the original Xbox. It's simple to set up with a controller port to USB cable needed, which you will also find a link in the description box below, with compatibility of controllers such as the Xbox One Elite 1 and 2, 360, PS3, 4 and 5, and also the Switch Pro controller. You are bound to find one that you have already laying around, or just one that you personally prefer to have in this setup. That would be better than the original wired Xbox controller, especially if you are still using that massive OG Duke controller. This adapter has provided me with some great alternatives that has brought me back to this console that I'm sure will be sticking around in my personal setup. Back now to quickly brush up on the specs. The Miyoo Mini is packed with an ARM A7 1.2 GHz processor, so no form of change with the original one here. But now we do have a 3.5 inch IPS screen, keeping that resolution of 640 by 480. The RAM here has still had no change with 128 MB and DDR3. Storage in my case is a 64 GB card, but it can accept up to 128 GB. With features like the vibration motor and Wi-Fi built in, which is great to have those retro chivos and online gameplay. It does have a 3000 mAh battery, so we do expect around about 5 to 6 hour gameplay. So the hardware specs here has not changed from its predecessor, but with that built-in screen and Wi-Fi, this is where it's all standing out. Here's a comparison with other recognizable handhelds, which I'm sure you guys are aware of, where it sits comfortably in the middle of the Anbernic RG35XX and the original Miyoo Mini. Here's a closer look now to the original Miyoo, which personally I've never been a fan of the first Miyoo. That may trigger a couple of people off, but personally I've just found it very unpractical and due to its size and complication within the market, which I hope we won't see this now with the Plus model. Stay good Miyoo. But we are heading in the right direction with this Plus, with this built size and screen. Now booting this up takes around 20 seconds, which is great and has a very simple navigation menu with plenty of settings to tweak to your own preference. We can change the brightness level, but I did have to test out this Wi-Fi just to confirm that it's all working, and we're all good. There's a fair few screen adjustment settings which you just don't see on these handhelds, so that's nice to see. The button layout adjustment as well, which is a nice addition to these settings, and also you can download yourself some tasty themes. We have an app section here, which I'm sure the modders out there will have some fun with this, but we do have RetroArch, so you can make your adjustments if you're advanced in that way. But most of the time you'll be hanging out in the game section, where this starts to go a little bit downhill from here. You do have your pre-built-in ROMs, of course, which do have the typical fake ROMs, misplaced names and misplaced art, but you do get around about 25 to 30% that are correct. As I said in the past with these devices, you're always better off sorting out your own proper compiled ROMs in its structured folder. Straight to the Game Boy Color, it is displaying its own border art, which is pretty typical of these handhelds, that is just not really placed correctly, and it is using a non-really advised emulator, so it does have those frame drops. But for example, using the NES, it is using RetroArch and it does run pretty great, and it does has the recommended settings. By pressing the menu button, that does pop up a little option panel where you can then change some of the additional settings, or just if you want to quit and get out and change your game. Mega Drive just have its own scan lines already set, personally not much of a fan of that. But when it came to Neo Geo or FB Neo games, this is where games were just taking forever to load. I managed to boot up the RG35XX and loaded the title up there by the time this game actually loaded up. But I won't be going any further details on this OS, as I recommend, just like a lot of other users, to get behind a third-party OS called Onion, which I'll be covering more detail and in depth with a future video, where the link will be provided in the description box below. But I will mention that its compatibility would run up to the generation of PlayStation 1. I did find that these games did run very comfortably, even this harder to run games that run in 480p, so it was a nice surprise there with PlayStation 1. When it comes to the audio, it does do the job, but I did find it not as good as I found in previous handhelds. It does come across with a weak tinny sound and really focused in the mid to high range only. Here is a quick example. And to get a better idea, here's another example comparing it to the original miyoomini with its speaker upgrade. Let's move on to the screen quality. For a lot of people, this will do the job just fine, but when you compare this with a lot of other competitors, you will notice the saturation and brightness levels are a little bit lower, and it does not really have an impressive viewing angle. This did come to a challenge to me when I was using this outdoors. While this picture doesn't really do that much to that comment, I did have a little bit of more visibility as shown in this picture. For some OTG controller support, I do have this external power adapter, which I then tested about 2 retro bit controllers, a 360 wireless dongle, PS5 and an Xbox One controller, and nothing was happening, so no OTG support here. For video output, there's still no joy. I did manage to set this all up and it is pretty much of a useful feature, especially in my needs anyway. So I'm pretty down the fact that this does not have any video output. Another thing to mention is both with the OG OS and the Onion OS, when I was charging this device for about 30 minutes a time, it would not confirm the amount of charge that has been put into this, but then I would reset it, then that bar would then fill up. I had a quick look inside and this is really easy to open, which is pretty great for modders if you're interested in adding or installing anything to the hardware, but I have seen better quality boards like the RG405M, but I'm not that knowledgeable when it comes to circuitry. This is definitely a tight squeeze to fit in this shell, and this is quite a little cute vibration motor. That's so tiny. So Miyoo have done a great job with this, plus the build quality, design and features. For me, the size of the shell could be a little bit longer like the original Game Boy. With this back buttons as well raised a little bit higher, closer to the mid to the higher end of this handheld, just to be more comfortable in my hands. Long usage could cause a bit of uncomfortability. Another minor problem is this 1.2 GHz processor. It is capped around for PlayStation 1 games, but you may run into some minor compatibility issues due to its limitations, but so far the games I've tested have been running great, so it could be completely wrong with that. The pre-installed OS does have its issues with its preset emulators causing performance issues, which you would then have to go out of your way to make this more of a stable handheld. So guys, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and keep an eye out for some of my future videos regarding any OS upgrades and versus comparison videos with a strong competitor of a budget emulation handheld of 2023, the Anbernic RG35XX. So thanks for watching, and if you liked it, hit that button. If you want to support this channel, click subscribe, leave your comments below, and I'll catch you a lot on my next video.